right, we've got June Gem number 2. This is going to focus on the workflow designer, which is the first thing you see when you click on creating an Nintex workflow. And we're going to do this both in the on-prem environment and in Office 365. So here we're going to just start off with a simple SharePoint list. Click up here, and in this little drop down, we're going to create a workflow in Nintex Workflow. But the first thing you see is the select a workflow template. This is broken up into a few categories, so you can actually select one of these categories and then select one of the actual templates, click on create, and it will actually build you a workflow. Now this is a skeleton workflow, just a starting off point, and you'll see all the little warning symbols. These basically tell you that these actions haven't been configured yet, so you're not going to be able to publish this particular workflow, but sometimes it's a nice way to start off your workflow design or your business process. So let's go back to the beginning. We'll do new again. Now, the templates are good, but generally I start off with something like a blank template. That way I can build out whatever I need. All right, so here we go. So first of all, you'll see on the left here, you can drag this out if my mouse will work. There we go. Okay, so you can make that a little bit bigger, and you'll see all the actions on the left here. So the default ones that are commonly used are send notification and the assign flexi task action, but you can see all the different categories down the bottom. So for example, if you're looking at some user interaction, which is where all the task actions are, you can click on that and you'll see all those. Again, we can actually make this a little bit bigger to see all the actions there. Now, that's where the actions are. There's also the design actual canvas over here on the right, which is where you actually build out your workflow. Now you have a number of ways you can actually add actions to the workflow. So let's go back to the commonly used ones, and you'll see the send notification action. If I want to send an email or a Skype for Business or link message, I can simply click on this action and drag it over here. My mouse is being weird. There we go. Right, so that's one way you can add an action. The other way is you'll see this insertion points, these little boxes here. You can click on these and you get a little pop-up menu, and then you can insert actions this way as well. So again, there's your commonly used. If I want to assign a task, maybe a request data, I can just do that. Right? So really easy to add actions to your workflow design. The other thing that you can do is add other actions into this canvas, and that's via this Nintex Live catalog. Now, Nintex Live is a cloud service that Nintex has, so in order for you to be able to access this, there is some configuration at the central admin side because Nintex Live lives outside your SharePoint environment. So you would need to be able to configure Nintex Live to be able to talk to something on the internet. So this may be available to you and may not be. When you click on the catalog, it'll come up with a number of actions you can add. These are all kind of line of business systems that exist on the internet. So you'll see some Amazon EC2, some Bing actions, and there's actually a whole bunch. Given that we're dealing with an on-prem environment, it's really interesting to know that there's actually a ton of Office 365 specific actions as well. So if you're looking at doing any sort of hybrid environment, you can actually use these actions in your on-prem workflow to start automating some of those processes that start off on-prem and then maybe do something in the Office 365 environment as well. If I actually go back to all, you'll actually see down the bottom here, there's 145 of these, and they're pretty actively growing as well. So you'll see that number change. Some of these actions in the Nintex Live catalog include things like Salesforce and Dynamics CRM, DocuSign if you want to do electronic signatures. So there's a whole bunch of actions in here that will help you build out some of your more complex business processes. Okay, the other thing I wanted to let you know about is just using this particular interface. I've added a couple of actions in here. Let's actually drag a task action because it's got some branches. It makes it a little bit easier to see. Let's say I have put this in the wrong place and I want the task action to be the first one. I can very easily just move that up to the top. And if I want a notification to be sent after an approve, I can just drag that into this branch here and maybe request data over here. So you can see how easy it is to start moving around your business process, little components, little actions in here. Now, some of the other things I want to point out, and some of these are related to the Office 365 Workflow Designer as well, is the import or out of the import and export buttons. Right, this makes it really easy for you to take a workflow that you've built in one list and move it to another list. So if I click on export, you actually see a little thing pop up down the bottom here uh, of a workflow that I can save. So this is a nice export of a workflow. So that's import export. Workflow settings is where you would go to configure a lot of the sort of the initial settings of a workflow. What's going to happen? How's it going to start? Things like that. The name, description. So definitely give it a name other than new workflow. Description is going to help you and your colleagues understand exactly what this workflow does. And then you have your start options. Things like, is this workflow going to have the option to start it manually? I generally leave that on, but you may want to turn that off if it's in a production environment. Do I want my workflow to start when an item is created? So for example, an item is created in a list or a document is uploaded to a document library, or when one of those items or documents is modified. So I can have yes or no, or I can do conditional. So you could potentially have multiple workflow designs on one list and have conditional starts, right? And it could be as simple as, does the title contain some particular value? Or if this is a particular content type, I'd like to start this particular workflow, but not another workflow. I'm not going to go through all these options, but just some of the ones that I really like are expected workflow duration. This is really good for if you have a manual process right now that maybe takes 5 days and you think, I'm going to automate this and it should be faster. So instead of 5 days, I expect it to take 2 days now. You can come in here and click here to configure and say 2 days. That's how long I expect this workflow to take. Now, if it takes longer than 2 days, it's not going to stop the workflow, but it will appear in one of the Nintex Workflow reports called overdue workflows. And it gives you some nice visibility into what's actually causing a bottleneck in a particular workflow. We'll get into that a little bit later in one of the other June gems. Some of the other things that you would like to see, so create workflow status column is checked automatically. What this does is every time you build a workflow, SharePoint will automatically create a column in that list with the name of that particular workflow. And when the workflow runs, there'll be a value in there that will say what's the current status of that particular workflow. And it could be in progress, it could be completed, it could be errored, and you'll be able to click on that and actually get to the workflow history to see what's going on. The other two things I want to mention are task list. You see we have the default workflow tasks list and the default history list, which is Nintex Workflow History, because Nintex stores its own workflow history, which is not affected by a timer job that SharePoint has that cleans up workflow history after 60 days, so that's nice. Workflow tasks, you can create a new one, and what that means is you can kind of share the loads rather than having one task list with all the tasks for the entire company. Maybe you have an HR specific task list, or maybe you have a particular process that's going to get run quite a lot. This will let you have a specific task list for that particular process. So that's some of the things that I want to talk about around the configuration of a workflow. Other than that, let's jump into the Office 365 version and see what that looks like. All right, so here's our Office 365 list. Again, looks a little different as to where Nintex Workflow is. It has its own button, so I can click on that button and that will go and bring up the Workflow Designer. All right, I'll do a little bit of loading. And let's actually jump on to the screen here. Whoops, there we go. This is what you'll see. There'll be a button up here, which is the new list workflow. Right? So if you haven't got any workflows, you won't see these two. You'll just have this button, and you can click on that, and that will take you to the Workflow Designer. So notice how it's very similar to the on-prem one. You have all your actions on the left here, and the design canvas on the right. Similar sort of actions, not the same, but very similar sort of actions that you can use to build out your workflow, your business process. We still have the import-export buttons up here. Note that the on-prem and Office 365 exports are not compatible at this stage. Now, let's actually drag an action on here. So we'll drag this assigned task action onto here. So there's my task action. I can do the same thing, like I said, with the dragging and dropping. I still have the ability uh, to click on the actual little insertion point here and add actions. So all that is the same, moving actions around, that sort of stuff. The other thing to note is both on-prem and Office 365 has this little drop down here where you can do things like copy and then go somewhere else and do a paste, and it will copy and paste that action and all the child branches as well. For the settings, it looks a little different, right? You still have the start options. It doesn't have the configurable options for starting items starting workflows when items are created based on a particular condition, but that's something that should be coming in the future. Same thing with task lists. You have an option to select a workflow task list and a workflow history list. And other than that, little warning symbol in both the on-prem and the Office 365 environment, letting you know when a workflow is not fully configured, and all you'll be able to do is save at this stage. You won't be able to publish it. If you do try to publish it, let's click on publish, you'll see, oops, something went wrong. So you need to make sure that that warning symbols are gone, all the actions are configured before you can move on. All right, let's jump out of here. Make sure we covered all the major points here. Notice a little copy and the copy and be able to do the paste. So definitely do that in the on-prem environment. The one thing you can also do in the on-prem environment is actually disable actions. So that's kind of important. Disable it, you'll see they'll go gray and they won't actually run. Even though they're disabled though, any actions that have a warning symbol will still affect your ability to publish the workflow. So even disabled actions have to be configured in order for you to be able to publish this workflow. Okay, and finally, I want to mention clicking on the actual actions to be able to relabel them. This really helps in designing workflows and documenting those workflows for yourself and for your colleagues who need to look at that particular workflow design and make some changes. So there's a lot of information in this particular gem, so hopefully you get a lot out of this. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them my way or add them to the bottom in the comments section. Thanks for watching.